Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Zach, and we're going to be taking a little bit of a break into the things about our mind, and we're going to instead focus on the things we do, the people we do them with, and the mediums, or the medium in this case, that we do that with. However, I can't do this one alone, so as always, I'm joined by Rafe. Rafe, how you doing today?
Zach, I am phenomenally, wonderfully fantastic. It is it's a great day to be doing a podcast with you, and I am grateful as always to have these listeners listen with us because it's worth doing this when you guys are around. So, hey, thanks everybody for listening. You know, you can always reach us at Bufnagle@Bufnagle.com. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Apple Pod. Zach, we are everywhere. You know, we are. I heard from a guy the other day. And Zach, this is the honest to God truth. I heard from a guy the other day, and he said he was out in the woods walking along and kicking over some rocks, trying to find a salamander or something like that. And he kicked over this rock, and he was like, "Oh my God, this is like carving on it. This is like a rune or something like that." And he said he picked it up, and it was this weird language he didn't understood. So he took it down to like the local folklore guy, and he said, "Can you translate this?" The guy was like, "Oh yeah, this says something like listen to the buff." It said something like that on the rock, and that's Zach. That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. Zach, we are everywhere out on the world out there. We're on the bottom of rocks, wherever, all over the internet. And hey, if you are new to our podcast, welcome. Thanks for coming. We're glad you are here. Give us 4 episodes and see if we don't give you a reason to come back. And remember, tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. And if you subscribe, Zach, we get great things. If you can subscribe and get a 5-star review, I get chocolate pudding, and you get
I get some brownies.
Brownies. That's right.
Which is sometimes dinner, but that's a different point entirely.
Well, sometimes you get dinner, sometimes you get brownies, and sometimes the brownies are dinner.
Yeah, it's great. Everything works out. Yeah, but last couple of weeks we've talked about like mindset, mindfulness. The term I like using is biohacking, understanding your nervous system, your brain, things like that, how to better improve performance. But instead of talking about that type of stuff today, we're going to instead talk about a really good conversation that actually we had earlier, and it's video games as a cultural icon and their role in pop culture and kind of what video games represent. We've had a couple episodes back, we had our buddy Eli on, and he talked about esports and video games as a competition thing. But we're going to be dissecting them more as a culture, pop culture, work of art that they are, and like kind of the role that it plays in society.
It is interesting that you phrase it that way. And I was thinking as you were talking, when I was a kid, there were no video games. There were like mechanical games that people could play. So there'd be games like if you went to like the pizza. Can you hear the dog, Zach? Are you hearing the dog?
Yes, I can hear the dog.
All right, so you'd go to the pizza parlor or something like that. There'd be a pinball machine. Right, there'd be a jukebox with this mechanical arm that would put the records on. Have you seen those things?
Yeah. Right? Okay. Well, yeah. You got the pinball machine. You got the jukebox machine. You got your pinball wizard, and you got the jukebox hero just right there, ready to go.
Oh, and that would be the thing. Like there was always a guy in every town or every little pizza joint that had a pinball wizard. Some guy that was so good. My cousins had a pinball machine in their house, Zach. And it was really odd because my uncle was a very serious man, and his kids, my cousins, well, sometimes they were less than serious. All right, let's just put it that way. But for some reason, they got this pinball machine, and we would go there. I would play the pinball machine like all the time when we were there, and it was a lot of fun. But you push the buttons, and the levers go, and the ball bounces around, and you could. Since they owned the pinball machine, you could load it up with like 75. You just hit the button. It's neat, Zach. You ever watched the quarter drop in? There's a little spring on the inside, and when the quarter comes in, it rolls down, it hits the spring, and it trips the switch, and that gives you a credit. So all you'd have to do is open the front door of the pinball machine, and just tick, 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 hit that spring a bunch of times, and it'd be like dropping quarters into the machine. But we played a lot of pinball, and there was like air hockey was a thing you would find like at the roller rink and stuff like that. And, Zach, we had BB guns when I was a kid. We actually had a shooting gallery in our basement. It was this mechanical box that had the ducks would go across, and if you hit them, they would fall over, and then when they came around next time, boop, they'd be popped back up. But we shot BB guns in the basement, Zach. And ask us if we wore eye protection.
Did you wear eye protection?
I don't think there was a word. Eye protection was like if you see the BB coming, you should squint. I mean, that was the eye protection we had. So, but video games came out, I think probably the 70s, late 70s or mid 70s with Pong, which was the two bars and
which was virtual tennis, more or less.
It was virtual tennis, and then there were games like Breakout and things were the thing. All right, but then they started being other games. They were like you would get these things at the at restaurants and bars, pizza shops, places where kids hang out.
Galaga, Pac-Man.
Yep, Qbert. You ever heard of Qbert?
Yep.
Okay, it was like a 3D
Tetris.
Tetris. Yeah, Tetris was awesome because you could go really slow with Tetris. You didn't have to play it fast, which made it really good for me. If you play the original Tetris really slowly, eventually, like it's in this castle. Eventually, this guy walks out of the window up at the top, and he stands there with his arms crossed, and he kind of taps his foot like, "Come on, dude, let's keep going. Let's get a move on." But I never played it like that. I just let him. I don't care. I'll just keep racking up the points here. But we did all those. But games are different now, right? I mean, we progressed from like the video games. Like people had systems, but then they moved on to computers, and that's where they are.
Yeah, I mean, like most of them are on your PC, your computer, or there's game consoles that came out. I want to say they started late 80s, if not mid 80s, throughout the 90s and then early 2000s. They were very popular. But additionally, like you mentioned, like the role of video games in society changed. Before, like when you were a kid and kind of growing up, they were this entertainment thing. You'd go to the arcade or something and you'd play Pac-Man, and there was that entertainment, and you weren't looking necessarily to win or to have the best score. Yeah, you wanted that stuff, but you didn't like chase after that. Like that wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be the best X, Y, or Z. I'm against you in this game and I'm better than you. There wasn't that type of mentality.
Yeah, if you went to the thing, you could play a 2-player game, which means you would play, and then I would play, and you would play, and whoever got the best score would win. And if you had the highest score, you could actually put your initials in the game. Do you remember that?
Yep.
You put the initials in the game, and that was about as good as it got. And then there were contests and stuff. Like I remember in Milwaukee when I was in high school, there was a Pac-Man tournament, and the championship was held at Milwaukee County Stadium on the gigantic video board. And people thought that was like the most incredible thing. And there are pictures of these guys standing there playing Pac-Man and watching the big TV up on the wall or up on the, over the outfield fence. So, but that was a different thing than what we're seeing now.
Yeah. I mean, like, yes, games like Pac-Man, Galaga, Tetris, they have a cultural impact, but then other games came along, especially for my generation and my youth. There was this series of games by Humongous Entertainment that we like to classify as the backyard games, which were the backyard sports games. You had your backyard baseball, your backyard football, your backyard soccer, backyard hockey, backyard upside down flower weaving class. And you had all of that stuff. But additionally, inside that, you had these characters that you could relate with. And there was this like human element, and you got to pick your team. And it was like, you and your buddies go into the field, Sandlot style, picking your team. I want the best guy, and you got to have the best guy, right?
Right. And the best guy, okay, so there, just to make sure we get all this right, it was backyard baseball was the first one, right? And then football and then baseball?
It was baseball, football, soccer.
Right. And then but you also had basketball and hockey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can understand once they had basketball, you can see it was pretty easy to develop hockey, right? And soccer, where those games are different than the other ones. But you had, if I remember right, the first versions of those just had the backyard characters, right? And then later versions every year they would like get actually Brett Favre was in there, Steve Young
Steve
was in there,
Young, Jerry Rice,
Barry
Steve
Sanders.
Bledsoe, which is I think just a hilarious fun fact. Dan Marino.
Is Tom Brady in there?
Tom Brady at some point was, but
Wow,
not in like the good ones that were like my youth, like before 2003.
So those were probably right around 2000, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was when Brady was.
Additionally, what those games did is they created, and other games that followed created these pop culture icons. Like Pablo Sanchez is the best player in the backyard sports universe, other than some certain players that you can get in via cheat codes. But that's a completely unrelated point.
All right, wait! I gotta call time out. So there were So you could they were rated on like 4 footballs or 4 baseballs, right? And Pablo maxed out in every category, right? Except
one.
And that was that in every game.
I believe it was pitching for baseball. He had 3 out of 4. He was the guy, and you want first pick. You're taking Pablo because he was the guy. And the best thing about the backyard sports games is they had people from different races, different ethnicities, different religions, different whatevers. They just wanted to get together and play ball. It was just a great thing to see, and it taught kids, especially like me at a young age, it's like, hey, who do you surround yourself with? What do those people look like, and what are they teaching you? And it gave that lesson in a super like unique form, a storytelling form, and so we can touch on a little bit later of what is video games. And I think it's a very unique situation. And additionally, like my generation, if you mention Pablo Sanchez, everyone's like, oh yeah, that's the guy. Like everybody knows it, which is a wonderful, fantastic thing, because it's not just like a one-off thing. It's a thing that's become ingrained into pop culture itself today, which is super cool.
It is funny when I never really thought about that until you pointed out, like, Pablo Sanchez was this little guy, right? And he was called the secret weapon, which was funny because it wasn't a secret. he was the best. There was no question about it. And he spoke no English. Is that right?
I think he might have like 2 lines of English in his whole dialogue script.
But there was a guy named Dmitry, right?
Yep.
And he was this big, giant Russian dude, right? And he was like
in the slide rule.
Yeah. So and then, but there were other guys, right? There was like Tony Del Vecchio was like this classic New Jersey Italian guy, right?
Yes.
And he sucked on a lollipop instead of a cigarette because you couldn't have that in these games, right? And there was a guy in there was a guy in a wheelchair.
Yep, Kenny Kawaguchi, best pitcher in the league.
Right, Kenny Kawaguchi and his sister, right? And a lot of them had siblings. Okay, so don't forget who were the girls?
Ashley and Sydney Weber, tennis stars.
Those were awesome, and they would do better if you had both of them on the same team. Right?
Yeah, so there was internal programming of if you had them on the same team, they did better. And then there were the 2 brothers, Amir and Ahmed Khan. And if Amir was on Ahmed's team, so Amir was the younger brother, he played better. But there was no additional bonus for Ahmed. So you got this benefit of like taking the little brother, and he's going to perform and he's going to show up. I mean, there's just all these other like really intricate sports details that they added. Like, hey, if you got siblings on your team, they're going to play better. They're going to work hard, stuff like that. If you take the little brother who might not look like he's that good, and he's with Big Brother, he's going to show up because he wants to make Big Brother proud, because that's how you're mentally wired. Because as little brother, it's just like in your DNA by default.
Well, and I thought it was kind of funny that they had those stereotypes in there, and they were funny, all right. But it didn't. It was just humorous, is all it was. There was nothing negative about it. There was nothing that affected them from a sports point of view. Pablo was great, and everybody knew he was great, and no one said, "I'm not taking Pablo because he doesn't speak English," and nobody says, "I'm not taking Tony because he smokes a lollipop." I mean, you took the best players, all right? And some of them were they were from all over the world. They had all sorts of different surnames that you may growing up in Wisconsin, I never would have heard 70% of the names that were of the surnames that were in that game. But nobody cared because you just wanted the best player.
Yeah.
And that was a great cultural lesson for you guys.
It was. And then it developed this framework of like what video games can be, and there's these teaching tool. And then obviously, as I grew up, video games evolved too, and the next evolution of video games became competitive shooters, which we touched on a little bit when we had Eli on with esports. And the idea around these competitive shooters is, you're on a team, 4v4, whatever it may be, 5v5, 10v10, and it's your job to kill and take down the other team. And there's this idea that came around video games, especially with the rise of those games, that video games became a competition. So they went from this entertainment to almost this teaching tool to this social pop culture thing to then just become this highly competitive thing. And like the graphics of the game might look really cool, but like eventually, this is just me in my old age speaking. I got to the point where it's like, I just want to relax and play games and have fun with my friends. And it's hard to do that when the games being pushed are these big you versus somebody else thing. It's not you and your buddy pulling the tractor, pulling the weight up the hill.
Yeah, I always thought when you guys were really little and you started playing some of these, it was before the backyard games, I think, or right when we started getting into those, you guys would play games against each other. And as a parent, it was really, really hard to watch because one kid would always beat the other kid, and the winning kid would taunt the losing kid, and the losing kid would get mad, and and it would just devolve into like wrestling, and and I always thought I really want a video game where these two guys instead of being against each other, they can be on the same side against some. I don't know if against the Nazi zombies or something like that, but just against a struggle. So I always wanted, like, okay, you be Lewis and I'll be Clark, all right, and we'll go
Lewis and Clark, the video game by Bufnagle. Who says that?
That's right. Well, but I think some of these things came into being, right? You had games when you were little on the Game Boy, right?
Yep.
You had this thing called, what was the farming game?
Harvest Moon.
Okay, what did you do in Harvest Moon?
Farmed. You ran a little farm by yourself. It was a single player game. So that's the other thing is how single player. We'll touch on this later, but single player games have now become single player with buddies games. So you can play the single player game, or you could bring your buddies in, and you can all play the single player game together and do whatever you want to do because it's creative and open enough as a world that it's fun and relaxing to do. And I think it's a unique situation. But like those single player games, they've advanced and changed, and we can touch on that a little bit later because there's something with the art of those games and the style of those games that I want to touch on. But
so the Harvest Moon game, okay, I loved the Harvest Moon game because it had a great little song, all right, which was pleasant to listen to, and it didn't result in people crying and screaming, which was really great as a parent of young kids, and you seemed to do things that were beneficial. I mean, it was kind of, you did farming. I would have much preferred you guys to help me mow the lawn, but I'll take the computer farm.
You didn't like us mowing the lawn. Hold on,
what
are you talking about?
You didn't do a very good job.
I know, I'm a very good teacher.
Yeah, you were 6. You couldn't push the lawnmower, right? So, but the Harvest Moon thing but that's what you do now, right? You and your brother, who is now somewhere in somewhere far away doing army things, right? And your buddy from high school, or Harry's buddy, collectively your buddy from high school who lives in DC, Eli, you guys get together on a regular basis and you play a game together where you do what?
Well, we farm. So we have taken what we did as children, and there's this game called Stardew Valley, and you run a farm as upwards of up to 4 people. We have 3. So if a 4th person wanted to join us, they are more than welcome to join our farm. And we all kind of just have different roles on the farm. Eli, he goes to the mine. He mines for ores and things like that so we can upgrade our tools so we can be more efficient at using them and things like that. I like to just do the farming thing, the organization of planting crops and watering crops, and it's fun. And then I watch over the chickens because I like chickens, and I make Harry watch over the cows and the other animals, the
ungulates.
Yes, the there's an episode idea. We can talk about that at another point. But we're doing these fun things collectively as a group. But the best thing is we get to play the game the way we want to play the game. There are no rules. There's achievements to do, and that's fun. But like we get to do it as a group, and we have fun cooperatively pursuing, enjoyment and pleasure and joy in life, and it's a good thing to do. And a lot of video games have transitioned and to either be in these competitive games or these co-op relaxing play with your buddies game. And then there's a third category, which is this a single player experience on itself. And most of those games are actually focused not on the single player, but on the fact that you are in this world, in this environment, and you have beautiful artistic graphical representations in front of your screen, and you kind of almost more or less get lost in that world and you get to explore that world. And there's beauty in that beyond the competitive side of video games.
A couple things came into my head as I was listening to you talk about this, and I was like, what came into my head at the end was the idea of the metaverse. And I know there's been a lot of discussion lately about how the metaverse is like, I'm one of these people that's kind of pushing back against. I'm not in the metaverse as far as I know. It just seems to me that to go into this virtual world where nothing is real, that I don't really want to live there. I might want to go there now and then to do like this. What you and Harry and Eli do in the farming game, you don't farm. What you have is that you have a medium for you guys to get together and stay friends, even though you're far away.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess the metaverse kind of does that in a sense. I guess. But it does worry me a little bit that Nike has come out and they have trademarked virtual sneakers so that when you get in the metaverse, you could buy Nike sneakers and you can be hip.
I'm going to save everybody from my rant about intellectual property in the metaverse and the mess of the legal situation that is, in my opinion. But it's we just get to sit down, hang out with our friends, and do the farming thing. Or if I wanted to, I play a lot of like single player strategy based games because I don't want to compete. I've competed a lot in my life, and well, sometimes I just want to relax and drink my water and just like explore the place that I'm allowed to explore because that's fun and that's engaging. And I think that leads to this idea that like video games, especially like the last 5 years, have become an art form. It's the way that people, maybe it's like pixel art is the thing, or maybe it's, whatever it is. And this, like the beauty of the game itself is sometimes enough to like purchase the game because like this is like visually super cool to experience and be part of.
I remember the first one of these games that I saw where I guess I call it a storytelling game, but what you did in it impacted how the story, the story arc, I guess is what you would say. And these were, I remember a game back, Zach, I was in college, so that would have been in the mid 80s. There was a game in the arcade, and I don't remember exactly how it worked, but I think it would change, it would change like hard drives or discs under, you could hear this thing moving around and doing this stuff inside. And I guess you were a knight going through the medieval world, and you were trying to.
I think that's where most of them are these days because it's a fun scenario to be in.
But I'm hearing, and I don't do a lot of these games, so this is just from hearsay. There's the dog again. All right, so I hear the that the storytelling ability coupled with the visual arts that's going on and the music. Don't forget the music.
The soundtracks are phenomenal.
Right. If you are a musician, if you're majoring in music now, you're not writing symphonies. Well, you can, but nobody goes to hear that anymore, right? They hear you. They are exposed to you through movies and video games, and that's where the money is to be made as a composer, is in those two genres.
Yeah, and it's an incredible thing that like video games have. They are what they are, but they're also this portal for other people to express their artistic ability. Maybe that artistic ability is a story, and you're able to tell a beautiful story, whatever that story may be. And then you get help from your buddy who's an artist, who's able to paint the picture and imagine the world and do whatever. And then you add the music on top of it to add in the emotional feeling or whatever else you need to get the player engaged to what they're doing. And that's a gift. So this whole this storytelling, art, music component put into the medium that is video games has elevated video games from just a thing of entertainment or competition, but to a thing of immersive experience where you feel like you're connected to something maybe bigger than yourself.
I think that's the intent, I think, in a certain sense, of this metaverse thing. But for something about that is different, I think, than what we see in the artistic form of the game. And it might be that, like, for example, if I'm reading Shakespeare, for example, and I'm understanding hopefully that art will reveal to me a component of the human experience, right? If I'm reading Shakespeare, I will pick up on why it's good to have to be a moral person, or why it's bad to try to kill your father. Right? I should pick that up if I'm reading Shakespeare, and hopefully if I'm playing the video game, I will pick up on a component of that. I would hope that if I'm reading Shakespeare, I don't have to live in Shakespeare world to do that, right? And I think my thought about the metaverse, the idea that's the whole experience. I don't know. There's something about that seems a little it violates that art medium. That if I'm just playing a video game, I don't have a problem with that. If I'm fully immersed, if I got to wear that thing on my head, all right, no, I'll tell you, that would send me into migraines and or epileptic fits in a matter
Or
of
both.
moments, or both, right? And then but at some point I got to think, you know what? That's no. Give me real life with all its joys and all its sorrows, and the good and the storm clouds and the sunrises and rainbows, and that's how I want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the best way to think about it. It's like this, I mean, video games, books, movies, all of them are a storytelling medium to allow us to feel more connected as a human being. And if you're not being able to do that, and I don't believe the metaverse is able to do that because I think it's manipulating what it means to be human, you lose that humanity. You lose the joy. You lose the love. You lose the sorrow. You lose all of the breadth of human emotion because you're so wrapped up in the materialistic thing. Sometimes you just need to go outside and appreciate like the beauty that is the nature or the world that you're living in. And like maybe you can do that experiencing that through a video game. Maybe you do that by experiencing that through a walk. Maybe you do that by watching a movie that you love with somebody that you care about, because that's the human adventure.
The movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Have you ever seen that?
No.
Okay, it's been done at least twice. But what happens is there's these plants come down, and they grab you, and they turn you into like this empty shell of yourself that is, well, they make a copy of you that is exactly the same as you, but it doesn't experience the real human part of you. It doesn't love. It doesn't have a loyalty. It's just this thing that goes through the motion. So it's all of the materialism of you without that other side, without the piece that is fully human. And that's part of the discussion in the movie is, do you want to be that or not? And when the body snatchers come, you don't have a choice. So I guess the buff is advocating for real human experience. Is that a way to say it?
I think that's kind of the whole mission behind us, if I'm not mistaken.
Do we say seek the good? Is that one of the goods?
I think so. Like that human connection, that human endeavor, whatever it may be. Yeah. Storytelling platforms like video games do that. They do it in a way, but don't just chase something to chase something. Chase it to feel a human emotion, to be part of something bigger than yourself, as I always say. And like, you are going to seek the good, be the good, and spread the good by doing that. And that's an important life lesson in itself. And the fact that video games, movies, other pop culture related things have evolved to be more than that, and to like kind of help hone in on those type of things is special and important. And finding those endeavors or those artistic representations that make you feel like that is something that you need to continue to chase.
So do you think, like, okay, so what's in my head right now is this idea that if I were like Johnny Shakespeare had, and I really, really wanted to live that like I could go to to the Renaissance fair and see what it was like in the 1600s. You
I
know,
don't think that's like what it's like in
but
the
see,
1600s.
but the thing, but well, no, it's what our perception of what the 1600s were like is would
Well,
be.
it's a romanticized perception of what we think the 1600s are.
Right, but the thing is, I can go to the Renaissance fair on the weekend and maybe eat the big turkey leg and walk around in old clothes and stuff like that and have a sword and talk about ye old watering hole or whatever it is. But you know what? I don't go live there all the time, right? And I that's what gets me. I think these things have a place in the human experience to help describe the human experience, but they should not replace the human experience. All right, and all of them, like you said, books, movies, storytelling, television, video games, whatever whatever you're doing, whether you go to a play or you go to the Renaissance fair, even that. But you eventually you have to come back. You have to come back to where you are. You can't pull a what was his name, Gil
Yep.
from Midnight in Paris. We talked
Yep.
about that a couple episodes back. You can't live in a world that's not your world. Right? You're
Yep.
called to live. You're called to live in your now, and
You can
and
pull from other things, and
right.
that's important. But again, if you don't live in that now, and if you don't seek that and choose that, you're not going to enjoy the adventure of life.
You know what, Zach? That's the way to say it. You know what's waiting for me right now is a piece of my life called a hot fresh pizza has just arrived. So I'm going to go enjoy that component.
Yeah, and that's a good component of life to enjoy. I want to thank you all for listening, and I want to go remind you to go seek the good, be the good, and spread the good. Enjoy the adventure of life.